Robert Johnson is considered one of the greatest blues artists of all time.
It's the template for what became rock and roll. I believe Robert Johnson was extremely talented, extremely gifted, and way off balance. Something's spinning strangely in that man's life.
Robert Johnson, king of the Delta Blues. The main story that everybody wants to know and wants to remember him by is that he was at the crossroads and he sold his soul to the devil to learn how to play the way he did.
I never seen him have to practice anything like that. Never seen him sit down and learn a song. He already knew it. Once he attempted to play it, he knew it. He had a built-in computer. Everything he heard was there. All he had to do was punch the button.
You folks going past Tishomingo?
Sure, hop in.
Say, I haven't seen a house out here for miles. What are you doing out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I had to be at that there crossroads last midnight. Sell my soul to the devil.
Robert Dodds, later known as Robert Johnson, was born on May 8, 1911, in Hazelhurst, Mississippi, to his mother, Julia Dodds, and his father, Noah Johnson. Robert's biological dad was never a part of his life. Shortly after his birth, his mother married a man named Charles Dodds, who was a wealthy landowner in the Hazelhurst area and also a furniture maker. They were known for being one of the more wealthy families in the community and lived an upscale type of lifestyle. But some of the white residents of Hazelhurst resented Charles Dodds' success. This was still less than 50 years after slavery was abolished and the Reconstruction era. So to see a black man living such an upper scale lifestyle just didn't sit well with him. It's said that after having a dispute with white landowners over money, Charles was forced to leave town after he had gotten word that a lynch mob had been formed and they were looking for him. Robert's mom, Julia, escaped to a nearby town in Mississippi with her children before meeting up with Charles once again a little over a year later in Memphis, Tennessee. But by this time he had changed his name from Charles Dodd to Charles Spencer. Coming up as a child in Memphis is where Robert found his love of the blues, and it would become a lifelong obsession. Eventually his mother and Charles Dodd divorced, and she got remarried to a sharecropper named Will Dusty Willis. They initially lived in Crittenton, Arkansas, before relocating to the Mississippi Delta near Tunica and Robinsonville. During this time, the overwhelming majority of black people had to work as sharecroppers on plantations. It was in the middle of the Jim Crow era, and black people had extremely limited options when it came to work. And for some people, it was all that they had. Robert would often clash with his stepfather due to his refusal to work in the fields. He didn't want to live the life of a sharecropper. He didn't want to be like his stepdad. His refusal to work would often result in him receiving vicious beatings from his stepdad. Eventually, Robert did start working in the fields, but he wasn't picking cotton. He created a makeshift guitar and worked himself up to being a novice player. He would go down to the cotton fields and play for the people who were working and maybe get a nickel or dime here or there. Eventually, he was able to work a few gigs at a spot called Will Dockery's near Robinsonville, a place where plantation workers can go on a Saturday night and finally feel a sense of freedom by being able to laugh and dance the night away. But Robert was ambitious and had dreams of becoming the most famous blues singer in the world. So he knew he would have to take his show on the road, and he was tired of constantly fighting with his stepdad over not wanting to become a sharecropper. So by the age of 16, Robert was a traveling musician, going town to town playing gigs by bus, train, or hitchhiking. He would play his harmonica and guitar on street corners for spare change, hoping that the word would spread of how good of a bluesman he was, and juke joint owners around the Delta would start to want him to come and play at their establishments so he could finally make some real money. Earning a living as a traveling bluesman wasn't easy because the majority of the towns they went to were extremely religious, and there was a growing sentiment in the Christian community that blues music was connected to the devil. It's been said that this theory originated from Southern Baptist preachers because during this time they weren't being paid for their services at the church, and most of them had jobs outside of the pulpit. Every weekend they had to watch juke joint owners making money hand over fist, while blues music was being played all throughout the night. This caused black preachers to hold a resentment towards those establishments and the music that they played. So they spread the word throughout their congregations that blues music was the devil's work, and it was created to connect with the evil underworld.
something happens with the spiritual, which is the music that came out of slavery, which was heavy, which was about, getting heaven when you die, or suffering, or being resilient and enduring. And then the blues was kind of like about the idea of not suffering on the plantation, but hopping a train and getting away from all of that stuff.
Y'all ready to drink? Y'all ready to sweat till y'all
A lot of film explores like the dichotomy of American culture and the relationship between the church and the juke joint is oftentimes
it's a conflicted one.
Yeah, but it's actually the same kind. It's the same type of environment. You know what I mean? Like you'll see the same people. Saturday night they acting crazy. Sunday morning they acting holy.
Yep.
But it's the same people.
Same people.
During his travels, he met a 15-year-old girl named Virginia Travis. The Mississippi Delta was Robert's main stomping grounds. She came from a very religious family, something that was extremely common in 1920s Mississippi. Virginia's family didn't approve of their relationship due to Robert being a blues musician, but the two were deeply in love, and they lied about their ages in order to get married. Robert made a promise to Virginia that he would give up his life as a traveling bluesman and become a good farmhand working on a plantation so they could start a family. Eventually, Virginia became pregnant, and when she was 8 months along, they sent her to live in a different town in Mississippi where her grandmother stayed so she could give birth. While Virginia was away, Robert secretly picked up his old habit of playing the blues. He had the idea that he could hit some of his old spots throughout the Mississippi Delta and work his way up Highway 1 and get to Virginia's grandmother's home just in time to see his baby being born. This was one of the happiest days of Robert's life. He was extremely excited about becoming a father and starting a family, but by the time he arrived, it was too late. Virginia had already died during childbirth, as well as their newborn baby. Robert was absolutely devastated, but to make matters worse, Virginia's family blamed him and said that this all happened because he was out there playing secular music, the devil's music, blues. This event changed Robert forever, and he felt like the only thing he had left was to dedicate his life to the blues and a life on the road. But first he headed back to his hometown of Hazelhurst, Mississippi, in search of his biological father, Noah Johnson. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on Robert's side, and he was never able to find his dad. But one thing did go Robert's way. He had gotten word that his musical idol Son House was going to be in nearby Robbinsville, Mississippi, and he made it his mission to go and get mentored by the musical legend. Son House came to Robbinsville to play with his partner Willie Brown, and Robert would follow them wherever they went, trying to learn whatever he could to become a better musician. But the thing is, Robert was a decent harmonica player, but he was absolutely terrible when it came to the guitar. He gained a reputation around Robbinsville for his lack of talent. It's said that locals hated to see him with a guitar in his hand and would head in the opposite direction in order to avoid the noise. Whenever Son House and Willie Brown were playing at the local club, eventually they would need to take a break, and during the intermission, Robert would try to sneak on stage and play the guitar. The crowd would boo and shriek in agony, yelling at Son House to take the guitar away from Robert. One night in particular, he was kicked out of the establishment for his terrible play, and this is also the night that he decided to leave town and vowed that when he returned, he would be the greatest guitarist and the greatest bluesman that they had ever seen. There are conflicting reports on exactly how long Robert disappeared from the Delta. Some people say that it was only for 8 months, while others say that it was up to a few years. But when he did return to the Delta, he was a different musician, and he was a different man. He walked into the club where his old mentor Son House was performing and asked him could he get on stage. But Son House said no and told Robert that the people weren't trying to hear all that noise. Robert said, "Don't worry about what the people say. Just let me show them what I learned." Then he proceeded to put on the performance of a lifetime, leaving the audience absolutely stunned, with some people saying things like, "Now ain't that fast?" referencing the fact that Robert was known for being the worst guitarist in town, and now he was one of the best that they ever heard. Even Son House and Willie Brown were in awe of the things that they were watching Robert do with the guitar. He was doing things that they had never even seen before.
I learned him good. When he started out, we was living not 2 miles apart. He was at home with his mother and father, a place called Robertsonville, Mississippi. but he'd follow me and Willie around on Saturday night, Willie Brown. And every time we stopped for rest and sit at a little guitar over in the corner or something and go out to catch air, get the guitar and be trying to play it and be just noising the people, And the folks would come out and say, why don't some of y'all go in there and make that boy put get that thing down, he running us crazy. Finally he left, he run off from his father and mother. Then he went over in Arkansas someplace. So he was gone about 6 to 8 months. So then he come back. When he come back, me and Willie Brown was playing out there, and he walked in. He said, can I hit a little tune? I said, nah, don't come back with that, Robert. I said, the people don't want to hear that racket. He said, let them say what they want to say. I want you to see what I learned.
Well, somebody take me in your eyes.
Robert was a novice guitar player, not very good.
This man was a nobody.
And then he disappears. A year and a half later, he's doing things with the guitar that even his mentors can't do. How could Robert possibly have gotten that good that fast?
Word began to spread about Robert's new talent. People were saying that it didn't even seem human, like it came from another world, the supernatural. And this is where the rumors began that when Robert disappeared from the Delta, he really went to go sell his soul to the devil in exchange for unlimited talent and the ability to play the guitar like no man had ever played it before. The story goes, Robert visited the crossroads around midnight at the intersection of 61 and 49 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. He got down on his knees in the middle of the intersection under the moonlight. He started saying words to summon the devil's spirit, and eventually the devil appeared. He took the guitar out of Robert's hand and tuned it using his magic. Then he told Robert that if I give you this guitar back, that means you agree to our deal and your soul is mine forever. Robert eagerly accepted the terms, thinking of all the fame and fortune that he could receive with his new talent. But according to blues historians, there's a much more rational explanation surrounding the rise of Robert Johnson as a great guitarist. It's said that in 1930 he relocated to a place called Martinsville, Mississippi. He was there still searching for his father, Noah, but instead he met blues legend Ike Zimmerman, who ended up taking Robert under his wing and even moved him into his home with his 3 daughters. The two became so synonymous with each other around town that people thought Robert was Ike's real son. He taught him everything that he knew about the guitar and how to become a great musician. They would practice relentlessly, but it was rarely ever in the daytime. It usually happened after midnight at the local cemetery. Ike told Robert that this would be the best time to practice because the spirits in the cemetery would hear the music and rise up, then take over your body and have you playing to perfection, guiding you to hit the right note at the right time.
Mr. Ike Zimmerman became my granddad's mentor. My granddad used to stay in Ike's house. Matter of fact, he was with Ike so much that Ike's children thought that Robert was their brother. They would practice in the cemetery across from Ike Zimmerman's house all times of the night. Ike would tell him, well, Robert, you can play here, you can get this as loud as you want, because nobody's going to say anything. Your audience is not going to say a thing. So they would sit on top of tombstones and practice. This happened for a period of 2 years. When he came back to the Delta, he was playing in a way that nobody has ever heard before. And so the legend was that they said the only way you could learn this kind of music like this, you had to sell your soul to the devil. So my granddaddy, being the man that he was, he said, okay, if it sells, we'll deal with it.
While he was living in Martinville in 1930, he met a woman named Virgie Mae Smith. She ended up getting pregnant and Robert wanted to marry her. But just like his first love, Virginia Travis, Virgie also came from a very religious family, and they didn't want him anywhere near their daughter or their grandchild because in their opinion, Robert was doing the devil's work and playing the devil's music. Ultimately, he was forced to move on, and in May of 1931, he married a woman named Carletta Craft. They left Martinsville and settled in Clarksdale, Mississippi. But Robert was conflicted during this time. A part of him just wanted to have a normal life, his own family, his wife and kids, but there was also a part of him that missed the freedom of living life on the road, living the life of a traveling bluesman. Robert told his wife Carletta that he was going to be getting back on the road, and this caused a serious strain in their relationship. Soon he was back traveling up and down the Delta, solidifying his reputation as the greatest guitar player around. His regional notoriety began to grow, and Robert became one of the most in-demand blues singers in Mississippi. But while Robert was out enjoying life on the road, his wife Carletta was suffering from a broken heart and passed away in 1933. After the death of his wife, blues was the only love that Robert had left, and he dedicated his life to her. Two of his favorite places to play was Memphis, Tennessee, and Helena, Arkansas, as well as other towns scattered throughout Mississippi. But he also traveled to places like New York, Chicago, Texas, Canada, and Kentucky. It's said that Robert had a woman in every town. That way he would always have a place to sleep no matter where he went. According to blues legend David Honeyboy Edwards, who would frequently travel with Robert during this time, he only cared about three things: his whiskey, his women, and his money. He needed his whiskey before he even stepped foot on stage, and going through an entire bottle was the norm. And although Robert was happy with the lane that he carved out for himself as a musician and the popularity he enjoyed down in the Delta, he still desired for his music to be heard on a more major level to a wider audience. So in 1936, he headed to Jackson, Mississippi, seeking out a man named H.C. Spire. He was a talent broker and record store owner, responsible for launching the careers of some of the greatest artists in Mississippi blues history in the 1920s and 30s. H.C. Spires was already aware of Robert's talents and put him in touch with a record producer named Don Law, who would later become the head of Columbia Records' country division. Robert took a bus from Mississippi to San Antonio, Texas, where he met Don Law at the Gunter Hotel for a recording session. It took place in room 414. The sessions took place over a 3-day span between the 23rd and the 25th of November, and it would serve as the very first recordings of Robert Johnson. He also recorded his most famous song, The Crossroads Blues, a reference to him selling his soul to the devil in exchange for talent and fame. Robert's last recording session would take place 6 months later, in June of 1937, where he met up with Don Law at the Vitagraph Warner Brothers building. It really wasn't a place that had a studio for music, so they had to create one. On the 19th and 20th of June, he would record over half of the 29 songs that he would become known for, with 11 of them being released within the next year. In his music, he would often mention the hoodoo religion that had ties to West and Central Africa and was used by Black Americans in the South during slavery and beyond. The spiritual practice was also known for having stories with characters meeting at the crossroads, where they would talk to divine spirits seeking both knowledge and guidance. So it's no coincidence that one of Robert's most famous songs is called Crossroads, and he spoke openly about hoodoo on songs such as They're Red Hot and Come On In My Kitchen.
You know, like the late 20s, early 30s was really like that time when it really took off. You know, the blues as we know it, and a lot of mythology, a lot of spirituality. You know, a lot of the supernatural vibe is right there in the music. Yeah. A lot of these musicians had songs about being haunted by the devil and being chased by their worst nightmares and trying to escape certain things, both natural and supernatural.
Early this morning, ooh, he knocked upon my door, and I said, "Hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go."
It was at these crossroads where the legendary experiences of Johnson trading in his eternal soul for temporary fame was said to have taken place in Clarksdale, Mississippi.
Well, they say he sold himself to the devil, and that's what they say.
I heard a lot of people say that he sold himself to the devil, went to the crossroads and all that.
But Robert had something weighing on his mind that he just couldn't shake. The thought of his son that he had with Virgie Mae Smith. He returned to Martinsville, Mississippi in hopes to finally meet his son, but he was once again denied that opportunity by the family. He came back the very next day offering money for the family to help take care of his son, but they wouldn't take that either and said that they couldn't accept money that came from evil. According to Robert's son Claude, he only seen his dad on 2 occasions, and both times he could only look at him through the window while his father helplessly stared back, and he would never see his dad again. In July of 1938, Robert's travels as a musician took him to Greenwood, Mississippi, and just like so many other towns that Robert had visited throughout the years, he made a connection with a woman there who was a fan of his music. They fell for each other fast and started to be seen around town together. But eventually her husband found out about their affair and vowed to get revenge on Robert. And on Saturday night, August 13th, 1938, Robert was performing in Itabena, Mississippi at a club called the Three Forks. Three Forks meaning pitchfork of the devil. Robert's music had everybody in the spot dancing and enjoying themselves and working up a sweat on the dance floor. During one of Robert's intermissions, he requested a bottle of his beloved whiskey, but what he didn't know is that the husband of the woman that he had been having an affair with was working at the Three Forks Club that night, and it said that he poisoned Robert's bottle of whiskey. When the bottle arrived at their table, the seal was already broken. Robert eagerly grabbed the bottle and was ready to turn it up, but David Honeyboy Edwards knocked the bottle out of his hand and said that you know we don't drink out of bottles with broken seals. And Robert responded, and you know you better not knock no $7 bottle of whiskey out of my hand again either. Robert quickly downed his drink and was ready to get back on stage and perform, but when he stood up, he immediately started to feel ill. A crowd gathered around him trying to offer him water and to keep him cool so he could perform again. But there was no use. Robert was extremely sick. He had to be carried back to his hotel room, and for the next 2 days, he was in complete agony. According to witnesses, he was in a persistent convulsive state, coughing up blood and sweating profusely. On the morning of August 16, 1938, Robert was found dead. No autopsy was done on Robert's body, only a pro forma examination, which only requires a minimum examination to get a death certificate, and no official cause of death was ever determined. There are multiple places that claim to be the final resting place of Robert Johnson, but the popular belief is it's more than likely that Robert was buried not too far from where he died in Greenwood, Mississippi. And to make his death even more tragic, he was on the verge of receiving the fame that he had been searching for his whole life. Because shortly after his death, a music producer named John Hammond for Columbia Records sought out Robert Johnson to perform at the famed Carnegie Hall. He sent the man who had previously worked with Robert down to Mississippi, Don Law, but news didn't travel as fast back then, and he had got word that Robert passed away. Despite the fact that he passed away, John Hammond was determined to get Robert's music to be heard by the masses, and he still performed at Carnegie Hall on a phonogram. He pushed it out to the middle of the stage and let the music play, and Robert received a standing ovation just as if he was there in person. By the 1950s, rock and roll was taking off, and this sparked an interest in the Delta blues. Artists such as Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Robert Johnson. It's said that his guitar riffs would lay the foundation for what would become rock and roll, and many people consider him to be the godfather of the genre. His style influenced an entire generation of artists, such as Ike and Tina Turner, Eric Clapton, Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, B.B. King, and so many more. Unfortunately, it's also said that Robert is the founder of something much more dark, called the 27 Club, where there have been numerous talented artists and musicians who have all tragically passed away at the age of 27. People such as Jim Morris of The Doors, John Michael Basquiat, Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and so many more. John Hammond and Columbia Records would take control of Robert's catalog of songs that he recorded. They remastered and re-released the material, influencing an entire generation, and also accumulating millions of dollars in profit. Robert's only son, Claude Johnson, was denied the opportunity to be a part of his dad's estate and legacy because he wasn't even acknowledged as his son until a 1998 court ruling overturned that, giving him access to his dad's estate and making him a part of his dad's legacy. And he would open up a museum down in Mississippi in his dad's honor.
Like I was telling my friends here, my dad, I only remember seeing his dad 2 times. And both of those times, my dad was looking out of the window of his granddad's house. And he looked out of the window and he remembered seeing his father, Robert Johnson, shaking hands with his granddad. Some of his strongest regrets are that he didn't get a chance to really get to know his dad the short time that he was alive.
In 2025, Robert's story would hit the Hollywood big screen after the release of the Ryan Coogler-directed film Sinners starring Michael B. Jordan. The initial idea for the film came from Ryan Coogler's relationship with his favorite uncle who passed away, but also loved the blues music, and he felt like he could connect with his uncle spiritually through the blues. But the movie is heavily influenced by Robert's story and even takes place where he allegedly sold his soul to the devil, Clarksdale, Mississippi. The film explores the complexities of life as a Black American in the Jim Crow South during the Prohibition era and the rise of blues music, along with the power that it has to take over the physical body, as well as connecting with the spirit realm, both good and evil. Almost 100 years after Robert's death, his story continues to live on. He's a pioneer as well as a musical legend, and Robert Johnson, he was only 27 years old when he died. Rest in peace.